Welcome back. Local politics now to the race for mayor of Corpus Christi, which is still undecided. Of course, the incumbent, Mayor Joe McComb, is facing council member Paulette Guajardo. That runoff set for December 15th.
And this is a campaign that has led to massive fundraising on both sides. And tonight, our Michael Gibson follows the money going into the respective campaign coffers.
These campaign reports for Mayor Joe McComb and runoff challenger Paulette Guajardo can be found on the city's website. The financial reports show how much money went into the campaigns and how it was spent. It also shows who is donating to each campaign. The goal in making these reports is public transparency. In this year's election, 5 finance reports have to be filed by the candidates, 2 semi-annual campaign finance reports filed by January 15th and July 15th. 2 more finance reports during their campaigns have to be filed as well, 30 days before the election and 8 days before the election. And this year, because of the runoff election, a final one will have to be filed after the runoff. But Guajardo claims that Mayor Joe McComb is not being transparent with his campaign contributions.
Joe McComb's campaign is funded by a political action committee, the Coastal Bend Tomorrow, and Philip Skrabarczyk is the treasurer of that committee, that political action committee, to the tune of $65,000.
She's delusional. She doesn't know what she's talking about. I file my campaign expense reports and contribution reports. They're on the record with the city secretary. They're online. Anybody can go and look at them. Mr. Skrabarczyk gave me $1,000. You can see how it's spelled in my report. Spelled the same way on Ms. Guajardo's reports when she made them in 2018.
Now, Mayor McComb has a political action committee, or PAC, largely backing his campaign. It's called Coastal Bend Tomorrow. Some $65,000 has been raised and spent by that PAC on getting the mayor reelected, according to filings with the Texas Ethics Commission. The treasurer of that PAC is Philip Skrabarczyk. He's the owner of Fulton Construction, whose business office was raided by the FBI earlier this week.
Transparent. It is not transparent. I list every single one of my expenses on my report. Why wouldn't I? I have nothing to hide. Where are Joe McComb's expenses? They're in that PAC. And so why do you have to name the PAC something different? It is just not transparent.
Those political action committees are set up separate and apart from any candidate. They make their own decisions. They pick which candidates they support, which ones they don't. I've not given any money to it, have not received any money from it. You know, bless her heart, she just doesn't understand how it works.
Mayor McComb says he wasn't working with or coordinating with the Coastal Bend Tomorrow PAC. Now, we spoke with Victoria Farrar-Myers, a senior fellow at SMU's Tower Center for Political Studies. She's an expert on campaign finance reports and PACs. She said under those circumstances, it's not considered a campaign expenditure, and a PAC can independently spend unlimited amounts of money, and it's all perfectly legal. Michael Gibson, 3 News.